Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 200 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL, and I'm joined by the best co-host in the game. You have heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. NFL. Mark, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Episode 200 here just in time. We're last previews of the AFC NFC divisions. We'll do one of our favorite shows of the year next week, and then we got real games to talk about.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about the NFL season being almost here. Like Mark said, we're going to finish our divisional preview series today, previewing the Wests. It's also crazy, Mark, that this is our 200th episode of Chalk Talk. I remember back when Dibes talked me into starting a podcast, and I was like, I think Mark would be a good guy to do a podcast with, because that first year we did draft coverage together, I liked the way that we both talked about football, but I felt like we disagreed all the time. And so I was like, let's do a podcast together, and I swear we've been like lockstep on most things ever since. So it wasn't the plan. The plan was to argue a lot more, but along the way, we've done a lot of episodes, covered several seasons of football. We've transitioned from being an Eagles podcast to an NFL podcast along the way. And Mark, I actually went back and I dug up footage. It does still exist in the wild of our first ever episode of Chalk Talk. And so I'm going to see if I can share this correctly here. And let's take a look at I just want to play a minute or so of our first ever episode for the viewers. So here we go.
Oh, man.
Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for the first ever episode of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined tonight by the best co-host that was willing to sit beside me for what we were paying, which was nothing. You've seen him on the Tough Cover pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. You can follow him on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. We're really starting to get closer and closer to football season. It's really starting to creep up. Big Eagles signing this week, so it's got the football running through my veins. I'm ready to start talking some Eagles, start talking some NFL.
Wow. And Mark, my backdrop has come a long way since that first episode. Yours has taken a big step back. Now you're potting from hotel rooms on AirPods. It's been a wild ride, but I got to ask you this. Do you remember what the huge Eagles signing you alluded to there was?
Let me think. So that would have been I'm trying to think what draft we would have done. It was the 2020 draft. So that would have been going into the 2021 season.
Yeah.
Do I have that right? Okay.
Yeah, it was going into the 2021 season.
Not Slay was a trade, so it wasn't Slay. Big signing. Oh man, Bradbury?
Nope, it was pre-Bradbury. It was Steven Nelson. The Eagles.
Pretty close. Yeah.
And I did cut that off before both of us kind of talked about how we were more excited for the Steven Nelson signing than the Darius Slay trade. I didn't want us to sound too bad. I'll make the listeners go dig up the whole episode if they want to hear some of the truly awful takes we had back in the day. But that was in July of 2021. So here we are 4 years later, still potting about the NFL, and it's been a wild ride. But I just wanted to share that little clip, and I wanted to go back and like pull some clips of things we've said over the years, but I just didn't have the time, and honestly, I wouldn't even know how to start that process.
That's great. That's a man who was not. I'm a married man now who has been, like Shane said, hotel rooms constantly. And for the folks, I apologize if my audio is not great today. I will be traveling with a brand new microphone starting next week, so deal with the AirPods today for episode 200. But I look like a man who was about 10 years younger, even though it was only about 4 years ago.
Yeah, we'll test out. Supposedly Riverside added some like magic AI audio stuff that we're going to try out, and hopefully it'll clean up and make our audio sound all right. But we're podcasting from the road for Mark, at least less than ideal circumstances today, but we wanted to get this one in so we could make sure We get everything in we wanted to pre-season starting. We got Krabby chiming in, says, "Look at all those young kids out there." Yeah, that was back in the day. But Mark, enough waffling. Maybe we'll reminisce a little more in our final thoughts. Let's jump into this preview. And if this is your first episode that you followed us for the previews, we have previewed 6 of the 8 divisions in the NFL. Today we're doing the Wests, the NFC and AFC West. We're going to run through these teams' key losses and additions from the offseason, talk about their strength of schedule, and when I give those strength of schedule stats, number 1 will be the hardest, down to number 32 would be the easiest. We'll give over-under win totals, some storylines to watch, some picks, and you'll have a little bit of a primer on what to expect from these teams heading into the season. And so let's start off in the NFC West with the team that gave the Eagles their most difficult game in the postseason. It's the Los Angeles Rams. They went 10-7 last year. They beat the Vikings in the opening round of the playoffs 27-9 before they lost to the Eagles 28-22 in a blizzard in the divisional round. And this offseason, they lose Cooper Kupp. They also lose Jonah Jackson, Bobby Brown, Michael Hoyt, and Demarcus Robinson. And they go out and add Devontae Adams, Poona Ford, Coleman Shelton, and Terrence Ferguson in the draft. They will face the number 23 most difficult set of defenses this year, the number 6 most difficult set of offenses overall, the 13th most difficult strength of schedule. Their over-under win total is at 9.5. And, I mean, honestly, the question for this team is Matthew Stafford healthy? And it feels like it's been the question for this team for the last, 3 or 4 years. But you have the reports about him needing an epidural for a bulging disc in his back. It puts week 1 in jeopardy. You wonder if that lingers and if it'll become an issue. And there is no bigger question for them than Stafford's health. But we can't really equivocate about that too much because we're not doctors. So a few other things to watch for, let's just assume he does end up being healthy, is can they get their run game going this year? Last season, the Rams were 31st in yards per attempt and 28th in yards after contact per attempt. And some of that was related to offensive line injuries, which is hopefully better for them this year. But their secondary was also bad. They were 28th in EPA allowed per drop back last season, and there wasn't much of an emphasis there this offseason. Now, it is worth noting they were better over the back half of the season, and so can they continue to build on that? Will Stafford be healthy? There's a lot of variables here swirling around this team. Mark, what are your thoughts on the Rams and that win total of 9.5?
It's funny, I have doubted the Rams a lot of times the last couple of years. It feels like coming into the season where you look at the roster and it's hard to imagine how this team's going to turn into a contender. And time in and time out, Sean McVay, every year, that's up for debate, but they're at least very competitive every single year. And I don't see a reason to think that stopped. I don't have enough information on the Stafford injury to tell me that that's going to stop this year. The last couple of years, I've taken a skeptical view of Stafford and thinking, is this the year? Is this the year? Is this the year? Throwing my hands up and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to stop doubting him because I think he's probably going to be fine or at least good enough. I think the question is probably, can he last through a playoff run and can he, still elevate his game in the biggest moments like we saw in their Super Bowl run, like we saw against the Eagles in a couple moments last year in the playoffs? Will he still be able to dig deep? And it's funny because when we talked about our quarterback rankings, Matt Stafford, it's hard to make an argument for Matt Stafford to be as high as we're going to put him on those lists statistically. You go look at his stats and game to game, season to season. It's hard to argue him against Jaden Daniels, which is a funny one, but guys that are in his tier that he kind of gets ranked in statistically. But the reason in those moments against the Eagles, he went and won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago and played great in that Super Bowl run. He's had playoff moments other than those two runs. So it's hard to quantify Stafford's value. I do kind of think, even if Stafford were to miss time, as long as it's not a, he's gone for the year situation. If it's a situation where, Stafford didn't start the first couple of weeks, although he did practice today, And there's some videos of him throwing some deep balls to Puka and Devontae that look really good. He looked pretty good out there today. So hopefully that he's just out there playing, and I guess hopefully for Rams fans, but I think hopefully for NFL fans or anyone who wants to draft Kyron Williams in fantasy, it's a good thing to have Stafford out there still slinging it. And if he's out there, if Stafford's healthy, just like I feel the same way about this team as I do about Tampa a little bit. Whereas I think you can make an argument that this team is just as good as any team in the NFC besides Philadelphia. The difference is I think Tampa has a slightly better roster, but the Rams have Sean McVay. And
yeah. Hey, Mark, while you were doing that a couple times, I heard like a buzzing, and I'm not sure if that is going to come through on the recording or if it's just something while we're recording here. And I don't think you can change your microphone while you're in. So why don't you bounce out real quick and come back in with your laptop mic, and I'll kind of talk for a second while you do that. So, sorry about that, folks. Running into technical glitches on a live podcast recording is always great, but we'll see if we can get that taken care of. We have had a lost show or two before in our past from some technical issues, so trying to avoid that here. But and I'll mention to Mark's point that we have, Krabby mentioning it's buzzing out here. Yeah, a lot of times, so it records our stuff separately, and for the audio version, it will sometimes not have that, but I don't really want to risk that. So we'll get Mark back in here in a second. To his point, though, I feel like we have doubted the Rams a lot. We doubted the Rams after they won the Super Bowl, as here comes Mark back in. All right, Mark, can you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Yep. We'll see if that fixes the issue there. I was just saying, Mark, that it feels like we've doubted the Rams a lot. They won the Super Bowl, and then that next year they went 5-12, and we thought this is it. And we kind of said the Rams were going to rebuild and maybe have the number 1 overall pick potentially, and then they went 10-7. And then we felt like last year, I don't know, and then they went 10-7 again, and they took the Eagles to the brink in the playoffs. But it feels to me a bit like the 49ers, who we have also been calling out for years, and they went 10-7, 13-4, 12-5, and then the bottom dropped out last year. Of course, that was largely injury related, but health is a big issue for the Rams, I think. And so I think it's fair. I would not take the over 9.5, just with the Stafford stuff swirling around, but as long as he plays, this is going to be a good team that's got a shot to make the playoffs. I just am not willing to take the over, especially in a gambling situation with, the injury stuff swirling there. So I'll take the under on the Rams, but I will say if he plays, I would still consider them the favorites to win the division if he's healthy.
I wouldn't bet it, but I'll take the over. I'll take the over. If you're making me take, we're doing one for every team, I'll go over. But this isn't one I would throw on my bet slip.
All right, let's keep rolling. Krabby here says I need to stop apologizing for technical issues. Sorry, Krabby. I'm just kidding. A little funny there. Let's keep rolling to the Seattle Seahawks, who also went 10-7 last season, but they didn't make the playoffs. Tiebreakers played into things here, and so at 10-7 they missed the playoffs, and then they lose Geno Smith this offseason. They lose DK Metcalf, Draymond Jones, George Fant, and Tyler Lockett. And then they go out and they add Sam Darnold. They get Cooper Kupp from the Rams, DeMarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys. They drafted Gray Zabel, Nick Emanwari, Elijah Arroyo, and Jalen Milroe. They will face the number 29 set of defenses, the 9th most difficult set of offenses, overall the 20th most difficult strength of schedule. Their over-under win total is at 7.5. And I think a lot of the questions here are around the offense. Can Sam Darnold be the guy he looked like before he fell apart at the end of the year? Traditionally, Kevin O'Connell quarterbacks has operated very well from clean pockets. You have Kirk Cousins. Even Nick Mullins thrived when he was kept clean from the pocket. And Sam Darnold did the same thing. And then when he didn't have clean pockets, when pressure got there, he just fell apart at the end of the season in a very important game for the 1 seed against the Lions. and then in the playoffs. Well, Seattle's offensive line has been a major issue over the years. Darnold has had major issues with pressure, and they did spend 3 draft picks there, including Gray Zabel, who I think they expect to make an immediate impact. And then the other thing that can really help mitigate pressure is a run game, and Seattle ranked 28th in the league in rushing yards per game last season. Now, Kenneth Walker did miss 5 games with injury, but he ranked 40th out of 46 qualifying backs in yards per carry when he played. So I don't even have any points about the defense. To me, it's just the offense. I think they made a big mistake in moving on from Geno Smith to go to Sam Darnold. And I have a hard time thinking things are going to go well for the Seahawks this year. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they made a huge mistake going from Geno to Darnold. If this team had Geno coming into this year, I think I'd be picking them to. It's tough. I have them at 8-9. I think it's at least 9-8. I'd have them at with Geno instead of Darnold, and you could maybe sway me with 10-7. I should say this: the last couple weeks where the Stafford question started to rise up, if we would have gotten a report where Stafford might not play this year, like that type of thing, I would have had a really hard time figuring out who to pick between Seattle and San Fran for me to win the division. I have them both at 8 wins. No spoilers. But if Geno was there, I would have almost looked at Stafford getting hurt as like an opportunity to, go in on the Seahawks and be a Seahawks, over better and stuff like that. Because the thing I do think there's a chance that this Seahawks defense, second year under Mike Macdonald, we've seen that the defenses under Macdonald have generally gotten, most places, defenses get better under the same place. But I think especially with Mike Macdonald in Michigan and then in Baltimore, his defense has really progressed the longer he was there. I think that there's a chance that, this team pops and they have an elite defense. They have a top 3 defense this year, off the strength of Leonard Williams and Boye Mafe up front. Maybe Byron Murphy takes a big step as a year 2 guy, first round pick last year. And we know how many names we like in their secondary, whether it's Devin Witherspoon, whether it's Tariq Woolen, whether it's Julian Love, whether it's Kobe Bryant. Like, they have 4 guys we feel pretty good about, even if it's Tariq Woolen. I think people act like Tariq Woolen got benched a ton last year. He played 900 snaps. I do think some of the anti-Woolen stuff out there is a little too much. He did grade out 43rd of 116. Grain of salt on PFF, but a fine corner last year. And I think we have seen him be, darn near elite in the past. So I think you get a good year out of that secondary that I think is absolutely possible. You have a lot of guys on the front that you feel pretty good about. I think Seattle is really, really banking on that. And I think if they get that, then maybe this is a 9-10 win team, and I'm underrating them at 8 wins. But I do think it's a lot to bank on. I see the potential for it. I'm not out on Seattle. I wish that this team had Geno. I actually am not even really all that affected by DK leaving. They sent out DK Metcalf. They did replace him with Cooper Kupp. And if Cooper Kupp's healthy, they should. It's not a 1-to-1. They're way different players. And it is Kupp and JSN is kind of a weird stylistic fit together. I do think both of them could play outside, so they'll figure it out. They're both very good players, but it's really about the QB and can that defense be elite? Because I think they're banking on there not being a QB drop off and that defense being elite.
Yeah, it's like you said. If Geno was there, this is probably the team I would pick to win the division. But given that he's not, I just struggle to see this going well for Darnold. And let's be honest, Geno did a lot to mitigate pressure, I think, from that offensive line that doesn't really get talked about a lot. The Geno truthers talk about it, but just the public perception probably doesn't show that. I don't know. I mean,
we're objective on Geno. I think we both have a baseline opinion on Geno.
Yeah, I feel like general perception of Geno is probably lower than it should be. And then I feel like there is a contingent of Geno truther film guys that have Geno way too high. When we did QB rankings, I had him 15, you had him 16. I think that's perfectly acceptable, but I think public perception probably would have him late teens into the 20s. And then the Geno truthers are no, he's a top 8 to 10 guy. And I just think
I agree.
he's an average guy with a great story, and I will root for him, and we're going to get to his team here in a little bit. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does reunited with Pete Carroll.
Yeah, you have to pick a team from the West that you're backing this year. I think I'm going with the Rams, and I'm kind of just plugging my ears. And something I forgot to mention, by the way, about Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua finished as the number 1 receiver on PFF last year. Sorry to switch teams up, but Cooper Kupp coming up reminded me of this since he came from the Rams. But Puka Nacua last year finished as the number 1 wide receiver on PFF grades. He also finished as like the number 3 wide receiver in points per game for fantasy football, and he had 3 touchdowns. Like, I think if Puka just has a bounce back regular touchdown luck, it could mitigate even any Stafford regression or games he misses. I think I don't know if enough people, sorry for a tangent and a sidetrack here, I don't know if enough people are bringing Puka up in general conversations when we're talking about elite tippy-top receivers. So I think he's there.
Yeah. All right, well, let's roll on to the Arizona Cardinals, who went 8-9 last season. They lose Kazir White, Will Hernandez, and Roy Lopez. They add Josh Sweat, Jacoby Brissett, Calais Campbell, Akeem Davis-Gaither, Walter Nolan, and Will Johnson in the draft. They will face the number 28 most difficult set of defenses, number 17 offenses, and overall the 22nd strength of schedule. They have an over-under win total of 8.5. And I feel like you and I have talked about this often, but the Cardinals retained their head coach, who is a defensive guy, their offensive coordinator and quarterback, who have gone 11-14 together over the last 2 seasons. Now, maybe it's a step in the right direction after going 3-5 in 2023, and Kyler missed half the season with injury, but they go from 3-5 to 8-9 in 2024. But it is still hard to believe in this trio. I mean, they added Marvin Harrison Jr. last season, who was seen as a slam dunk prospect, and they were stagnant as a passing attack last year. And so, I don't know, it's hard to see the offense taking a leap. It's easier to see it with the defense. I mean, they signed Josh Sweat. They signed Dalvin Tomlinson and Calais Campbell in free agency. They spend 5 of 7 draft picks on the defense. So I guess I think it's unlikely that like Kyler finally just figures it out. I think it's more likely the defense could take a big step. The question is that big enough to push them into contending for this division? So what do you think about that, Mark? And what do you think about their 8.5 win total?
They are my favorite under on the board. I have them winning 4 or 5 games this year. I think burn it all down. I think this is going to be an absolute disaster season for the Cardinals. I think it has everything in the making, and you just kind of touched on it. And I feel like I have one of these teams every year that I kind of just like, I feel bad because I keep repeating the same thing on every show I'm on about Arizona. And it's just, I really don't think there's a different media market in the country that you could have gotten away with bringing back Gannon, Kyler, and Drew Petzing. And 11-14, I think, undersells how much it feels like Kyler has regressed and how much it feels like Kyler, there is not the level of optimism we had 2 years ago for Kyler right now. And that's not just us, that's league-wide. I think that a lot of people felt like, oh, well, you know, Kyler's having to deal with Cliff Kingsbury. Now you see Cliff Kingsbury, you know, going to Washington and do what he did. I'm not telling you he's some genius or anything, but I am telling you, like, this guy who we all thought was an idiot was a better head coach than Jonathan Gannon when he was in Arizona, in my opinion. They went to a playoff game one year. I don't see the Cardinals' defense being anything more than average this year. Like, I would struggle to see this defense being better than top, like, fringe top 10. They finished bottom 5 2 years ago, and they finished 15th and 21st in the 2 big metrics last year. I think this is average. This is an average team across the board, except for some of the spots where I think they could be really below average. Like, this is, I don't see how this team has more upside than what they did last year. I guess my big question is, what changed from last year to this year? It's Josh Sweat. It's, like you mentioned, a couple of vets that they brought in. I'm trying to think. What I do love Will Johnson. That was a good pick. But like, I guess if you're in on Arizona, you have to believe Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to come out and right all the wrongs from last year and be the elite guy we thought he was going to be coming into the year, and that he's going to go out there and be a top 10 fantasy receiver, yada yada yada. What changed that's going to allow that to happen? The quarterback's the same, the head coach is the same, play caller, who Kyler has thrown under the bus in every capacity he can, every time he's ever asked a question about who's getting the ball or the red zone or anything like that. Kyler, go ask Drew Petzing. And then you ask Drew Petzing, he throws Kyler under the bus. It's like we've talked about this like 3 or 4 times where that's happened. I just can't believe that this is the strategy they're coming into the season with. They're like, everything's fine. In no other city that cares about football or cares about their team at all would that happen, in my opinion.
Yeah, they need some couples counseling there in Arizona. So I'm with you. I will take the under. I don't know if they're a disaster class 4-win team. I do think there's the potential for this to be a pretty weak division if the Stafford stuff is real, but I think this is a team that you're going to see some change. I think you'll see change in 2 of the 3 places next season. I don't know what that'll be. Whether it be Petzing and Kyler, Petzing and Gannon, I don't know how that shakes out, but I have a hard time seeing them running it back in 2026. So, all right, let's go to the San Francisco 49ers, who went 6-11 last season. This was their bottoming out year that we've talked about for a while. It was largely injury related. Then they lose Deebo Samuel in the offseason. They lose Aaron Banks, Shavarius Ward, Jalen Moore, Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, and Leonard Floyd. And they went out and added Mac Jones, so Shanahan finally gets the quarterback he wanted the whole time, McCorkle Jones. They get Mykel Williams and Alfred Collins in the draft. They will face the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL, 32 overall. It's the number 24 set of defenses, number 25 set of offenses, so it's primed for bounce back. Their over-under win total is at 10.5. And for me, storylines to watch. The defense ranked 31st in red zone scoring allowed last season. They get Robert Saleh back as DC, which figures to be a boost. I don't think Shanahan's trusted any of the DCs he's had since Saleh left. And so you get him back, and it's a nice place that you find yourself because they're in a similar place to the Eagles probably now, that Saleh's not going to get another head coaching gig, but he's kind of been proven to be a good DC. And so the 49ers hit the jackpot there. They've got, I think what you want is a DC that's not going to get a head coaching gig, and they have a head coach who's a phenomenal play caller. But getting him back is going to be a boost. However, you lose Dre Greenlaw, you lose Hufanga, you lose Shavarius Ward. So there is a significant depletion in the talent they get to work with. They lost Deebo Samuel to Washington last offseason, which I don't think is a big deal. I kind of think he's just done. We'll see. If there's a place he's going to work, it's going to be Washington. But
yeah,
Brandon Ayuk did the whole, I mean, we've seen this play out how many times in the NFL, but Brandon Ayuk held out, finally got paid, came back and underperformed, and then got hurt. And so the question is, will he bounce back this year? Can Christian McCaffrey bounce back, or is he just too old at this point? With the diminished supporting cast last season, the offense really struggled. As Brock Purdy posted a career low in EPA, the 49ers had a huge step back in yards after the catch, which is a big staple of the Shanahan offense. And so I expect them to be better this year. I am concerned about health on the offense and overall talent on the defense. I think 10.5 wins is too high. I'm taking the under. But I do think if Stafford is injured, this is the team that will probably win the division. What say you?
Yeah, you're probably right. I'm going under, but let me just read you the schedule. I don't do this very often, but man, this is pretty like, it's embarrassingly easy. At Seahawks, relatively tough. At Saints, very easy. Versus the Cardinals, let's say in the middle. Versus the Jags, I'd say relatively easy. At the Rams, hard. At the Bucks, hard. Versus the Falcons, I'll even say hard. At the Texans, I'll even say hard. at the Giants, versus the LA Rams, and then here's where it gets good. This last 7-game stretch, this is how San Fran closes their season. At Arizona, versus the Carolina Panthers, at the Cleveland Browns, versus the Tennessee Titans, at the Indianapolis Colts, and then you get versus Chicago, versus Seattle. But a 5-game stretch where you're playing the Cardinals, Panthers, Browns, Titans, and Colts. That is rough stuff. Like that is, they should go 5-0 or at the very least 4-1 there. So my official prediction for their season is that they are not good the first 10 weeks, like 4-6, 3-7, probably 4-6, let's say. And then we get 4-3, 5-2 down the stretch run where they get to 8 or 9 wins, but it doesn't end up mattering and they miss the playoffs. That's my official prediction. But if you tell me, that schedule is just so easy, I'm buying in. I understand why, but I do think you're buying in on a Niners idea that doesn't exist anymore. Part of what we loved about the Niners was, oh my God, look at Brock Purdy doesn't even have to make a decision. You have Christian McCaffrey and you have George Kittle, and then you have Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. And I know Shane's always been a little lower on Deebo than I have, and I think than a lot of us have. But at the peak of Deebo's value, he was a really interesting player that I think Kyle Shanahan probably got the absolute most out of for a good bit there. And then you had Jawan Jennings, who was like a blocking receiver and a good third down guy as a third receiver. And you had an elite offensive line. You're replacing a guy on the offensive line this year. You don't have Brandon Ayuk, which is I think the biggest thing. Brandon Ayuk starting the season on the PUP, and none of us expect he's getting drafted outside the top 35 receivers in fantasy. This is a guy who at one time was being drafted around top 10 as a fantasy receiver. He's a special talent when he's healthy, but you're relying a lot. When you look at this offense, you're relying on a guy in Brandon Ayuk coming off of a major injury, a guy in Jawan Jennings who is better served as a secondary option, and Ricky Pearsall, who played 450 snaps last year. And we weren't necessarily all that high on him coming out of the draft, and we thought that he probably got overdrafted by San Fran a little bit, if I'm remembering your opinion correctly. I know that's how I felt at the time. And even on defense, you mentioned a lot of the guys that they lost. I understand buying in because the schedule's so easy, but like I said, like this, you're buying in on an idea that I think is 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah, I think we said last year the window's closed for the 49ers. Yeah. Like they're not going to win it with this configuration of anymore. That they missed it, and injuries played into that. Some poor quarterback play and big spots played into it, but I think they're faced with being a okay team in what might be a pretty poor division, but I just think they've fallen a long ways from where they were a couple seasons ago. And that's the life cycle in the NFL, and I'll be curious to see if we see them back or if we eat these words entirely, if they just come out of the gate and are awesome this year. But it's not what I expect for sure.
And something that's crazy, Bryce Huff finished as the 38th edge rusher out of 119 last year on PFF, according to PFF. So Bryce Huff, good season for the Eagles.
Yeah, he was awesome last year. All right, let's keep rolling. We're going to flip it over to the AFC West now. Let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, who went 15-2 last year. They beat the Texans 23-14 in the playoffs, beat the Bills 32-29, and then lost to the Eagles 40-22 in the Super Bowl. Their key losses this offseason, they lose Joe Thuney. They lose Tershawn Wharton, Justin Reed, DJ Humphries, DeAndre Hopkins, and, of course, most importantly, they lose the Super Bowl. Their key additions are Jalen Moore, Christian Fulton, Josh Simmons, and Omar Norman-Lott. They will face the number 4 set of defenses, number 26 set of offenses, and overall have the 6th most difficult strength of schedule, with an over-under win total of 11.5. Question for me is, can Patrick Mahomes continue to carry a bad offense? Joe Thuney is gone. Jawan Taylor is coming off of a terrible season. 5.3% pressure rate allowed, 19 penalties. They draft Josh Simmons, but it's still a rookie tackle, right? You got Rashee Rice facing potentially a double-digit game suspension that's still in the hearing stages. Can somebody else step up? Will Xavier Worthy take a leap in year 2? He had 287 yards and 3 touchdowns in the playoffs, but it's worth noting 148 of those yards and 2 of those touchdowns came after going down 34-0 in the Super Bowl. And so if you just eliminate the Super Bowl, over his final 5 games of the season, he averaged 64 yards a game and scored 3 touchdowns. It's not what the Chiefs were hoping for when they traded up in the first and drafted him. And so can he take a leap? Well, somebody's got to step up. The Chiefs were 12-0 in one-score games last year. Now, we typically will say, you flip the result of the one-score games and we'll expect some regression there. But it's also worth mentioning Patrick Mahomes leads all quarterbacks in NFL history in winning percentage in one-score games at 70%. But even his average would have had them with 3 to 4 more losses last season than they had. And so, this is a team that you never count the Chiefs out with Mahomes, but it really feels like this offense could be in a pretty difficult spot this year. What are your thoughts on the Chiefs?
I think that they're not quite the team that they have been over the last couple of years, even when people have counted them out. I have not. And this year I started to, and then Rashawn Slater went down. I was ready to pick another team to win this division. I was ready for that team to be the Chargers, and now that's gone. The Chiefs are going to win this division. I do think for the first time, Buffalo or Baltimore takes them down this year. And I when I say that, I probably mean Baltimore. I think it's the year for Baltimore. I think Baltimore takes them down. I think they just have such a better roster. The Chiefs do have devil magic. Obviously, they win. They've been to the Super Bowl more often than not in Patrick Mahomes' career. But I think this is the year. The pieces that they have lost over the last couple of years, and you just look down their roster, and it feels like there's more holes. There's not quite the depth that there used to be throughout the roster, and the big kind of, I guess, if will be Josh Simmons, who there has been incredible buzz about in Kansas City, and beat reporters are saying he's like the best rookie tackle they've ever seen, and he looks unbelievable. He's fully healthy and all that stuff. I loved Josh Simmons in the draft, and I was very mad that they stole him at 31. I think that they probably just stole like an all-pro tackle eventually, and that's just annoying. But will he be that good right away? That's a big what if, and we'll find out soon because they play that first Friday against the Chargers. But that's kind of the big X factor for me more than anything on this team.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that the Chiefs haven't drafted a first round tackle since 2013, and so beat reporters might be comparing him to Kingsley Suamataia last year or Eric Fisher in 2013, either of which you would hope would be favorable. But that's a huge X factor for them, is what Josh Simmons is able to come in and do.
And it was a very Howie draft pick. It was a draft pick of a guy who would not have been possibly available to you talent-wise. It kind of reminds me of Landon Dickerson, where you got Landon Dickerson at 37, but if he didn't have the health issues he had, he would have been a top 15 pick, even at interior offensive line. Same with Josh Simmons. I think Josh Simmons would have been a top 10 pick if he didn't have the health issues he had. Slides to 31, and Kansas City gets a guy who, for all traits and intents and purposes, was a top 10 to 15 guy.
Yeah. All right, well, let's keep going. Let's go to the Los Angeles Chargers, and you just mentioned one of their biggest storylines, but they go 11-6 last year. They lost 32-12 to the Texans in the playoffs, behind a 4-interception performance from Justin Herbert, by the way, who is now 0-2 in his playoff career, with a 27-0 blown lead to the Jags and a 4-interception blowout by the Texans, where he completed 44% of his passes, but you will often find him ranked far above Jalen Hurts in QB rankings. They also lost Joey Bosa this offseason. They lose Josh Palmer, Christian Fulton, and Poona Ford. They add Mekhi Becton, Dante Jackson, Najee Harris. They draft Omarion Hampton and Trey Harris. They will face the most difficult set of defenses in the NFL, but the number 30 set of offenses. So good year to be a defensive player for the Chargers, I guess. Overall, their strength of schedule ranks 18th, and their win total is at 9.5. They finished 6th in sacks last year, but 19th in pressure rate, which means they got a little lucky in sack production, and then they lose Joey Bosa. So I think that's worth monitoring as they went really offense heavy in the draft and free agency. Now, I was originally going to talk about their offensive line and the strength I thought it could be, especially you bring Becton in, but now that Slater is hurt and out for the year, it feels like that's become a negative. The interior should be improved with Becton, but losing one of your bookend tackles especially when he's a top 5 to 10 tackle in the league. I am starting to like their wide receiver room. I think Ladd McConkey is awesome if he can stay healthy. They bring Mike Williams back, which I like. They also draft Trey Harris, and so I think that's trending in the right direction. I think the run game could be good.
Keenan Allen back too.
Oh, I missed that. They brought Keenan. They're getting the band back together.
Mike Williams got hurt, so they brought Keenan Allen back. It's a classic. Which one of them is always going to be hurt?
Yeah. If you add Mike Williams and Keenan Allen together, you might get 17 games. So this is a team we talked about as a Super Bowl contender, and I don't think either of us feel that way after the Slater injury. But how far do you think this team can go? Are you willing to touch that 9.5 win total?
Yeah, I'm still going over. I still think they're the 4th best team in the AFC, even without Rashawn Slater. What happened to me is that it took away the ability to really break into that top 3. And it took away the ability for another team to be a contender. We talked a ton about this last week, so I'm not going to dive too deep into the Chargers. I'm going over. Well, I realized as we were talking that I didn't give the number on the Chiefs. What was the number again?
The over-under?
Is it 11.5?
Yeah, it's 11.5.
I have them right on the line. I'll go under. I'll go under for the Chiefs and over for the Chargers. I have the Chiefs at 11 and the Chargers at 11, but the Chiefs taking the division.
All right. I agree with both of those. I'll go under Chiefs, over Chargers. But I don't think the Chargers get to 11. Probably.
Good
Maybe.
things
I don't know.
happen in Jim Harbaugh's second season at a place.
Yeah. Once he figures out how to implement his sign stealing or whatever scam it's going to be this time.
I'm not a fan either. Obviously, we all know how I feel about Michigan. But Stanford, San Francisco, Michigan has taken a huge leap year 1 to year 2. I heard someone give stats on a podcast and pretty impressive stuff. So I don't know if they'll take. They won what? 11, did they win 11 games last year?
They went 11-6. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be a very similar, like 11-6.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on to the Denver Broncos, who went 10-7 last season. They lose 31-7 to the Bills in the playoffs. They didn't really lose much this offseason. They lose Cody Barton, I guess. They added Talanoa Hufanga, Evan Ingram, Dre Greenlaw, and then in the draft, Jahdae Barron and R.J. Harvey. They will face the number 8 most difficult set of defenses, number 28 most difficult set of offenses, overall the number 19 strength of schedule. Their over-under win total is at 9.5. I find myself when I look at their roster wishing they had added a wide receiver. I mean, Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims isn't a super inspiring group, and Evan Ingram basically plays wide receiver but lines up at tight end, and so you can sort of maybe, but I would love to see them attack wide receiver next offseason. However, I am buying Marvin Mims stock. I was really high on him coming out of the draft. And
you love him.
Yeah, he started to play well down the stretch. He didn't get a lot of opportunities early, but he finished the year over the final 7 weeks of the season with 62 yards a game and 6 total touchdowns over that 7-week span. So I am buying the Marvin Mims stock, but I don't think they have a wide receiver one, and I wish they did. They're like a less deep Green Bay wide receiver room with a bunch of 2s. And so I would like to see them upgrade there. They're 1-6 in one-score games a year ago. So, if they win a few more of those, last season looks different. Bo Nix should be more comfortable in year 2, so maybe that pendulum swings the other direction. The defense should be really good, I think. They retain a lot of their core. They add Dre Greenlaw, who I don't like him, but I think he's a good player. They add Talanoa Hufanga, who I think is good. I think both of those guys are going to help the run defense out a lot. So I'm taking the over on the Broncos. I've got them over 9.5. What say you?
One of my favorite unders on the board here, and this is a big thing I've been preaching recently. We are people, and you're not doing this. You're not putting them as a contender.
No,
but we need to pump the brakes.
I still don't know if they can be a contender with Bo Nix at quarterback. I still don't believe in him that much. He proved last year I was too low on him in the draft, but I still am not bought in that he can quarterback an offense that can win a Super Bowl. Barring like absurd defensive play, like Peyton Manning Broncos era.
A Purdy situation.
Yeah.
In San Fran. He probably could have won in that situation, just like Purdy could have, if things didn't go, if things went differently. But quarterbacks the Broncos beat in 2024. It's a fun list.
All right.
One good one. Baker Mayfield, who they beat in week 2, by the way. If you look at Tampa early on in the season last year, they weren't the team that they really ended up becoming. They actually won that game 26-7. Props to Denver. Take that out of it. Aaron Rodgers, Gardner Minshew, Derek Carr, Bryce Young before he was benched, washed Kirk Cousins before he was benched, Gardner Minshew a second time before he was benched, Jameis Winston, Anthony Richardson before he was benched, or maybe after he was. It might have been after
between benchings.
Yeah, between benchings, and then Carson Wentz with backups. Those are the quarterbacks that Denver beat last year. I think Denver may have just been a really, really, really lucky schedule, and they don't have it again this year. When I filled out my playoffs, they were actually tied with the Eagles at the end of the year for having the most games against my projected playoff field, which was 11. They had 11 games against teams that I had making the playoffs. So I am way out on the Broncos. And another big thing is a big part of the reason we've talked about before. And the one thing I will say is you look at the Broncos roster defensively, and it's not like the Vikings. The Vikings, I think, are so primed for regression defensively. That defense performed way over its head. I think that was totally a Brian Flores coaching job, and they coached way above their talent. That didn't happen in Denver. Denver has a really talented defense. Pat Surtain, maybe the best defensive player in the world. You obviously have other pieces throughout that defense. Even in that case, even on defenses that are really, really good, 20% of top 5 defenses finish top 10 the next year. It's just how it is. I think they were incredibly reliant on 2 things. An easy schedule where they didn't play any quarterbacks. They went 1-7 against competent quarterbacks. If you go look throughout their schedule, every game that they lost besides one was against, they won 10 games. So every game they lost was against a competent quarterback, and they won 1 against Baker. And then B, I think they were really relying on having an elite top 3 defense last year, and we know that that's just not that repeatable year to year. So one of my favorite unders on the board is Denver.
All right. There you go. So I want to play the quarterbacks a certain team beat, but I'll save that for the final thoughts because it doesn't have anything to do with these divisions. So let's roll on.
Is it Washington?
Yeah, I want to talk about that now.
It's actually, if you look at let's do it now. Let's do the tangent because that's what I quote tweeted. If you look at my tweet that I sent about the Broncos with that tweet that I just found, it's because I quote tweeted someone's tweet about the quarterbacks the Commanders beat. I was like, let me play this game about the Broncos. So go ahead and read it off.
Yeah, okay. So you want to talk about the Commanders and play the quarterbacks they beat. The Commanders beat Kenny Pickett. They beat Daniel Jones, Trey Lance, Kyler Murray, Andy Dalton, Caleb Williams, which was part of a 10-game losing streak, I believe, for the Bears. Jake Haener, Michael Penix Jr. in his second NFL game. Now, they did beat Joe Burrow, so we'll give him that. They beat Deshaun Watson and then Will Levis, who is 5-16 as a starter. And then in the playoffs, they do get 2 playoff wins. One of them came courtesy of a 4-interception performance by the Lions in the NFC divisional round. But, if we want to play the team quarterbacks at a team beat, we could acknowledge also that this is one of the reasons I've talked about the Commanders being primed for regression as well.
Here's what I'll say. I think people are skeptical of the Commanders, though. I think there's more skepticism of Washington than Denver. I think people are more willing to elevate Denver to like contender status. Now, maybe part of that is just we're looking for a 4th team in the AFC. I do think that's what part of that is, and I had it with the Chargers, and now I don't. I don't think it exists if it's not the Chargers.
Who has a better record this year, the Commanders or the Broncos?
Commanders for me, and a lot of that
I agree.
is Giants and Cowboys. I'm really low on, so
yeah.
I think that's 3 or 4 wins right there.
Yeah, I'm higher on the Commanders than I am the Broncos, for sure. And I trust their quarterback a lot more. I think Jaden Daniels is really good. I think Bo Nix is fine.
MVP this year. That's the difference. The difference is the
or
MVP
he could be C.J. Stroud this year and totally fall off. We don't know, but I've bought in a lot more on Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels is fantastic, and the only reason he probably wasn't in my top 5 quarterbacks this year was that it was a 1-year sample size.
Yeah, and because Jalen won the Super Bowl and played incredibly on his way there. Like, this is not a Jalen Hurts or a quarterback rankings show, but I was just talking about it to my buddies over the weekend, and it's just, you think about the 4 biggest days of Jalen Hurts' life. And the NFC Championship in 2022, we put up 38 points on San Francisco. The Super Bowl, he comes out and we put up 33 points. Was it 33 that we scored in that game?
I don't remember.
Did we lose 38, 33? I can't remember the score. In that game, I could be way off there. I don't rewatch that game if you can't tell. So Jalen played whatever you want to say. Jalen played great in the Super Bowl there against Kansas City, outplayed Mahomes, and then he comes back 2 years later, and in the NFC Championship scores 55, and then in the Super Bowl, obviously does what he does, outplays Mahomes the second time and puts up 40. It's. I don't need to be arguing online about Jalen Hurts. He showed me what he needed to show me. I don't have any doubts that I have to work out online.
Yeah, I mean if you just go look at Jalen Hurts, the 2022 run, he completes 60% of his passes and then 71% of his passes in those 2 games with a touchdown, no interceptions. Why is it not showing his rushing stats? Oh, and four rushing touchdowns. So 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He comes back in NFC Championship game and Super Bowl 2 years later, throws for 3 touchdowns, rushes for 4 more, and has 1 interception. So what is that? 12 touchdowns and 2 turnovers in that 4-game postseason stretch.
He's carried to the Super Bowl. Anyone could have done it.
Yeah. All right.
Except for all the guys who throw 4 picks every time they get to the playoffs. Jared Goff being over Jalen Hurts on these lists, as if Jared Goff is not a creation of the situation he's in, is so funny to me. Like, that's the funny one. It's not like I don't even get angry about it because it's just funny to me.
Yeah. So. Well, now that we've done our final thoughts, let's cover the afterthought in the AFC West, I guess. The Las Vegas Raiders, who they go 4-13 last season. They lose Trevon Moehrig and Nate Hobbs. They go get Geno Smith, Jeremy Chin, Alex Kappa, Eric Stokes, and then in the draft, the headliner is Ashton Genty. They will face the number 2 most difficult set of defenses, the number 32 most difficult set of offenses. Overall, the 15th most difficult strength of schedule. Their over-under win total is at 6.5. And the Raiders are probably the worst team in one of the toughest divisions in football. And I think that really hurts their chances to have a good record. However, they're trying stuff, right? They've got a new quarterback. They've got a new running back, both of which are significant upgrades. They've already got one of the best tight ends in the NFL in Brock Bowers. And Geno Smith revitalized his career with Pete Carroll in Seattle. And so they're reunited now. Chip Kelly is the offensive coordinator, which should at least be exciting. Just don't give him personnel control. The Geno Smith, we talked about it a little bit with the Seahawks, but he's so good at mitigating pressure, which is good because the Raiders' O-line is shaky. But overall, what do you make of the Raiders, Mark, at 6.5?
I'm all in. I'm all in on the Raiders. I have them going over. I have them at 9-8. I actually have like 4 teams at 9-8, tied from the 6th seed to the 9th seed. And when I did the playoff predictors, the Raiders were one of the 2 teams that worked out the tiebreakers and snuck in the back door to the playoffs. So the reason that I'm all in, and the reason that I'll give you the reason to not be in just off the bat, is the defensive depth chart. There's a lot to be desired. They definitely need to have some guys pop, some young guys show up. They need an elite year from Max Crosby. They need Tyree Wilson started to develop last year. They need more out of him. But what I'll tell you is last year the Raiders had by far 32 of 32 the worst quarterback room in the NFL. Now you put in Geno Smith, who we just talked at length about, very much competent. At the very worst, you can't argue he's not competent. He hasn't went under 500 as a Seahawk, right? They've went either 9-8 or 10-7 every year Geno's been a starter. And then you had 32 of 32, the dumbest head coach in football last year, punting from the 31. He punted from the 31 last year instead of taking a 48-yard field goal. Like, in 2024, that happened, and we accepted it as a society. I guess we didn't.
I don't know if we accepted it, but
I guess. But Antonio Pierce is gone, and whatever you want to say about Pete Carroll, 11 of the last 12 years he's coached, the team he's coached has finished over 500. And then you bring in my opinion, I'll ask you, Shane, because you're not a fantasy nerd like me. The only reason I know this is because I'm a fantasy nerd. Who was the Raiders running back coming into the year last year? Can you name me who it even became throughout the year?
Who was their running back last year?
It would impress me if you got a name. It is a shameful list of names. It is truly you have to be a fantasy sicko to remember.
Yeah, I don't know. Who was it?
Zamir White was the starter coming into the year.
Yep.
And the guy who ended up getting a lot of the work was Sincere McCormick. In my opinion, the worst running back room in the NFL last year, easily. And in my opinion, you can go place a bet on ESPN Bet right now at 75-1 on Ashton Genty to win not just the Offensive Rookie of the Year, the Offensive Player of the Year. I think there's a chance Pete Carroll gives Ashton Genty like 350 carries, and we get 1,800 plus yards from Genty. And he goes nuts and goes and wins the Offensive Player of the Year and the Offensive Rookie of the Year in the same season. And that's what I'm banking on. I'm banking on them going from worst in the league to competent at quarterback, worst in the league to competent at head coach, and worst in the league to potentially best in the league. I don't know if that's possible, but very much elite at running back. I think Ashton Genty's that good. I have him 4th overall on my fantasy rankings. I think we are getting a historic rookie season from Ashton Genty this year. Maybe that's the kiss of death, but I absolutely love everything I've seen from Genty last season in training camp, him running guys over the other day in the preseason. I think he's a special talent, and I think we're going to get the best years of him over these next 3 or 4 years in this Pete Carroll tenure. And more than anything, we've seen with the Raiders picking Pete Carroll as the head coach, where you're picking a 70-plus-year-old guy who is just getting the train on the tracks, getting this team to relevance and competence and competing. Geno Smith, very similar, giving up a day 2 pick to go and lock down a quarterback and give him a contract. Even he's not the guy. We need to be competitive. They haven't been competitive in long enough. And then even you're at the top of the draft. You don't go you trade up for Travis Hunter or take a Mason Graham or a meat and potatoes O lineman. You took the short-term guy maybe in Ashton Genty. You took the guy who let's level us up to competitiveness right away. I love this over, Shane.
All right. I'll take the over as well. But I don't think this is a team like the talent on this roster is just not good enough, in my opinion, to be like a 9-10 win team. I think this is like a 7-8 win team. It's going to be tough for them in the division they're in, but I think they can hit this over. And, you know, I think maybe they can build some things around here. We just know, as we saw with the Giants, right, they're going to have to do it fast, taking a running back the eye. They're going to have to build that roster fast, but it's certainly possible. So I will take the over, but I'm not quite as high on them as Mark is. So
the defense might not be good enough to write the checks that my mouth just cashed for the offense. But I'm banking on, if they can just be below average on defense, I really do think they're going to win 9+ games.
Yeah, you forgot to mention in your you got Chip Kelly going tempo. They might be able to get Ashton Genty like 400 carries. So you never know how many plays they're going to get.
Maybe this was what he was meant to do all along, was be an offensive coordinator. He's not making personnel decisions. He's just there to scheme stuff up. And, you know, he's a smart, whatever people want to say about him, he's a really smart offensive mind. We saw, you know, go watch Dorian Thompson-Robinson in the Eagles preseason and tell me that, you know, Chip Kelly's not smart. He had that guy winning 9 or 10 games in college and looking really darn good doing it. So I think this might be what Chip Kelly was always meant to do. Maybe just interpersonally, he probably wasn't meant to be an NFL head coach in terms of how he deals with people and how he interacts with the media, and definitely how he dealt with having control of personnel. And I think that maybe his era as being like a top tier. I do, in my personal opinion, Chip Kelly would be best suited as like the head coach at like Florida. Like I do think like a team like Florida. I've said every big job that's come up over the last couple of years should have hired him. I thought Oregon, when they came up a couple of years ago, should have hired him. But I do think maybe this was what he was meant to do all along.
Yeah. Krabby says we should put a moratorium on Chip Kelly references for the foreseeable future.
I have a different view on Chip Kelly than most. Chip Kelly brought a lot of players here that really ended up being important. If you look at the Chip Kelly era and the couple drafts he was here for, we don't win these Super Bowls without him. In a way, it's weird to say that, but I think you needed the Chip Kelly era, and I think we learned lessons from that. It made us value Howie more after he left. Like, I think there's a lot of good that came from the Chip Kelly era. And also, go look at his record here. It's not like we were like suffering through these terrible seasons. He made the playoffs the one year. He got screwed the second year and went 10-7 and missed the playoffs just because of tiebreakers, just like Seattle last year, and then had a bad third year. But even am I wrong? They probably won like 7 or 8 games that third year. Did they go 7-9 when he got fired? If I had to guess.
I don't think so. I think they were worse than that.
Were they really bad? They might have been.
Because he got fired in season.
He got this 1 week to go, I think. Sherman.
Oh, 7-9. They were 7-9.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite as bad as I thought.
Because I remember when they beat the Patriots, we were. I forget when that was in the season. They might have been like 5-7 at that point. But people were like, well, you know, if you win out, like they're like, I do even remember that towards the end of the season. So
they won the last game after he got fired. So he was fired at 6-9, and then he went to San Fran, right, and went 2-14, and then got fired.
That's the worst decision he ever made. And I do think, like, in general, people kind of forget that happened. I feel like I don't think most people remember that Chip Kelly coached the 49ers. Yeah. But they were such a mess. They went, because that was that the first year after Harbaugh left high and dry and all the players left that Harbaugh brought in? Or was that, I can't remember if Chip Kelly came before or after Jim Tom Sula. Those 2 years after Harbaugh left were a disaster. And Harbaugh was, we know he's a special coach. So he kind of took everybody with him, but
he was after Tom Sula. Tom Sula came in, Harbaugh left, Tom Sula came in, went 5-11, got fired. Kelly came in, went 2-14 and got fired, and then they hired Shanahan.
They totally emptied the roster from what it was under Harbaugh to the point where Chip hired. I remember when Chip took that job, I was like, that's the worst job. And it was very much like when Kellen Moore took the Saints job. It was like the same kind of vibe where it's like, really? So bad job by Chip.
Yeah. Colin Kaepernick completed sub 60% of his passes that year as the starter. Blaine Gabbert played some games.
He should have just let Colin play the whole year that year. Blaine Gabbert was so bad.
Yeah, their leading
That's a whole other
receiver.
conversation.
Their leading receiver was Jeremy Curley with 667 yards.
It is a bad roster.
Quentin Patton was their number 2 receiver.
Ooh, Quentin Patton. Wow.
Vance
Never
McDonald,
thought of
number
Patton.
3. Torrey Smith, number 4. Rod Streeter. Yeah, not a good
Rod
situation.
Streeter, Arizona Cardinal. Was he an Arizona Cardinal? Rod Streeter, I think so.
I think, yeah, maybe. That's getting too old for me to remember.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that is going to about do it. We already had our final thoughts tangent, but that was mine. Mark, do you have any final thoughts you need to fire out there for the people?
Yeah, I guess I'll. By the way, we had Rod. Is Rod Streeter? He's in our front office. Rod Streeter is a scout for the Eagles. That's funny. I just went to look it up, and the first thing that came up was his front office. He's a West Coast area scout for the Eagles.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Well, Rod, if you listen to the podcast, we're big fans. Would love to have you on sometime.
Not Arizona. I was wrong. Doesn't look like he had any running with the Cardinals. I was just gonna say my favorite couple overs, favorite couple unders. I'll do my 4 favorite. My 4 favorite overs, 4 favorite unders. Since we're now done. Jets over 5.5. Packers over 9.5. Raiders over 6.5. And I'll go Chargers over 9.5 as well. And then my favorite unders, I'll go Cowboys under 8.5, Cardinals under 8.5. I'll go Vikings under 9.5, and I'll go Bronco. What was the Broncos number? Was it 8.5 or 9.5?
Broncos is 9.5.
I'll go Broncos under 9.5. Those are my 4 favorite overs, 4 favorite unders.
All right. Krabby said there was something at the beginning of the show we were going to come back to, but he doesn't remember what it was. I don't remember. Do you remember anything we stuck a pin in for later?
I think we stuck a pin in initially the Commanders quarterbacks, and then we ended up doing it right away, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if it wasn't the Commanders quarterbacks, if you guys listen back later, let us know and we can circle back to it next week. Yeah. But anyways, that's going to do it for episode number 200 of Chalk Talk. We are going to be off next week. And then we will come back before the Thursday night kickoff game, and we will do our Super Bowl winner an awards draft against each other that we do each year. And then we will be into our regular season schedule, recapping games. So, guys, we have made it through the offseason. You only have to endure one more offseason show with us, which is one of my favorite shows of the year, except for the expansion draft. And then we are going to be covering real football in a few weeks, recapping week 1. So thank you guys for joining in. Thanks for following along over whatever portion of the first 200 episodes of Chalk Talk you've listened to. We truly appreciate it. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and let's be honest, we know that you do, or you wouldn't be here for episode 200. Smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review wherever you stream your podcast. Help us get it out there to other people. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at ShaneHalfNFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. NFL. And we will catch you guys next time. I definitely played the wrong outro. Let's try this again. I am at ShaneHalfNFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. And we will catch you guys next time.